Are you seriously taking the dog right now? I cannot believe this.
The craziest part about living in an HOA neighborhood is that the people running it eventually start believing they own everything around them. Not just the lawns, not just the paint colors, not just the mailbox sizes, everything. And the story I'm about to tell honestly feels like one of those situations where somebody pushed their luck way too far and accidentally created the most satisfying revenge setup imaginable. Bro, hearing this completely blew my mind because this HOA president somehow convinced herself that she could use somebody else's private garage like it was overflow parking at a shopping mall. That's exactly how people act in real life when nobody has ever told them no before. The homeowner at the center of this story had spent years avoiding conflict, paying fees on time, keeping the property spotless, and trying to survive the non-stop HOA nonsense without attracting attention. But one entitled HOA Karen changed everything after deciding that her convenience mattered more than private property laws. What started as a minor parking issue slowly turned into one of the most petty, calculated, and absolutely legendary revenge stories I've heard in a long time. And the moment this guy realized she had parked inside his garage without permission, the entire situation took a turn nobody in that neighborhood could have predicted. By the end of this story, one welded garage door, one ruined vacation weekend, and one completely panicked HOA board would turn the entire neighborhood upside down. And honestly, the revenge was so perfectly executed that it almost sounded fake the first time I heard it. But the deeper the story goes, the crazier it gets. The real insanity started several months earlier, when the HOA elected a brand new president who immediately became the worst kind of power-hungry neighborhood tyrant imaginable. 2. The neighborhood itself looked peaceful from the outside. It was one of those upper-middle-class suburban communities built around fake luxury aesthetics. Every house had matching mailboxes, perfectly trimmed bushes, identical decorative street lamps, and enough HOA regulations to make residents feel like they were renting from a very controlling landlord instead of owning their homes. Honestly, those neighborhoods always look calm until you actually live there. Then you realize the entire place operates like a retirement dictatorship run by bored people with clipboards. The homeowner at the center of this story had lived there for almost 6 years. He worked remotely in software consulting, traveled often, and mostly kept to himself. He was the kind of resident HOAs usually loved because he paid fees early, never hosted loud parties, kept his lawn clean, and avoided neighborhood politics completely. But that all changed when the previous HOA president moved away and the board elected a woman named Cynthia to replace him. And bro, the second Cynthia got even the smallest amount of authority, everything in the neighborhood changed overnight. People like this always operate the same way. The tiny amount of power immediately goes to their head. Suddenly, they start acting less like volunteers and more like rulers enforcing kingdom laws. Cynthia became obsessed with controlling every microscopic detail of the neighborhood. Residents started receiving violation notices over flower pot colors, garbage cans left visible for 20 extra minutes, and holiday decorations still hanging 2 days after weekends ended. At first, most homeowners assumed she would calm down eventually. That never happened. Instead, Cynthia escalated harder every single month. 3. The homeowner started noticing her driving around the neighborhood constantly in a white luxury SUV, slowly patrolling streets like she was searching for violations to hand out personally. People began avoiding her entirely. Families would literally wait for her vehicle to pass before taking trash bins outside because nobody wanted another passive-aggressive warning taped to their door. That's exactly how HOA tyrants operate in real life. They create this weird atmosphere where everyone feels constantly monitored. And then came the parking crackdown. Cynthia suddenly announced that street parking restrictions would be strictly enforced to maintain neighborhood aesthetics. Guests could only park in designated spots. Overnight, parking became limited. Work trucks became prohibited. She started towing vehicles aggressively even during holidays. Multiple residents complained during HOA meetings, but Cynthia ignored every concern while pretending the rules protected property values. The irony was unbelievable because while Cynthia obsessed over parking regulations for everyone else, she constantly broke rules herself. Residents noticed her SUV parked in fire lanes, blocking sidewalks, and sitting inside visitor spaces for entire weekends. But nobody challenged her directly because she controlled the HOA fines and violation process. People were scared of becoming targets. And honestly, hearing this made total sense because HOA revenge campaigns can become insanely petty. Once someone in power decides they dislike you, suddenly every tiny thing becomes a violation. The homeowner mostly stayed quiet and tried avoiding conflict, but then Cynthia started targeting him specifically. It began with strange complaints that made absolutely no sense. First came a warning about improper garage organization visibility, even though his garage door remained closed almost all the time. Then she sent notices claiming his recycling bins were visible from the street despite security footage proving otherwise. After that, he received a landscaping violation because one side of his grass supposedly measured a quarter-inch taller than regulations allowed. Bro, at that point it was obvious she was fishing for excuses. The homeowner later realized why Cynthia had suddenly focused on him. His house sat directly beside the neighborhood clubhouse, which made his driveway one of the closest parking spots during HOA events. Cynthia frequently hosted committee meetings, social gatherings, and neighborhood functions there. Visitor parking filled quickly every single time. And apparently Cynthia had decided his property was the solution. The first incident happened quietly. One evening, after returning from grocery shopping, the homeowner discovered Cynthia's SUV parked halfway inside his driveway. No warning, no permission, no apology, just parked there like she owned the place. He knocked on the clubhouse door, waited nearly 15 minutes, and eventually found her casually socializing inside with several board members while his driveway remained blocked. She acted annoyed that he interrupted her. That part genuinely irritated me because some people become unbelievably entitled once they think authority protects them. Instead of apologizing, Cynthia treated the entire situation like he was inconveniencing her. She eventually moved the SUV while rolling her eyes, dramatically enough for nearby residents to notice. The homeowner tried staying calm. He assumed maybe it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. Over the next few weeks, Cynthia repeatedly used his driveway during HOA events. Sometimes it lasted 20 minutes, sometimes several hours. Every confrontation became more frustrating because she never acknowledged wrongdoing. Instead, she framed everything like temporary sacrifices residents should tolerate for community benefit. Then things escalated further. One Friday afternoon, the homeowner returned from lunch and discovered Cynthia's SUV fully parked inside his garage. Not partially inside, completely inside. The garage door had been left open because contractors repaired shelving earlier that morning, and apparently Cynthia saw an opportunity for private parking during another crowded HOA event at the clubhouse next door. Hearing this honestly made my jaw drop because who even thinks like that? Parking in somebody else's actual garage requires a completely insane level of entitlement. At first he thought maybe there was some emergency, but there wasn't. Cynthia had simply decided that since the garage was open and empty, she could temporarily use it. The homeowner immediately walked to the clubhouse searching for her. Inside, Cynthia casually mingled with board members while eating catered appetizers like absolutely nothing unusual had happened. And somehow, unbelievably, she acted irritated when confronted. Instead of apologizing, she minimized everything. According to her logic, she only needed the space temporarily and planned to move eventually. She even implied that since he worked from home and wasn't using the garage anyway, it shouldn't matter. Bro, hearing that part nearly sent me through the ceiling because that's exactly the kind of sentence people say right before creating life-changing enemies. The homeowner demanded she remove the vehicle immediately. Cynthia reluctantly agreed, but she intentionally delayed another 40 minutes before finally moving the SUV. That should have ended the situation. Instead, it became the beginning of the biggest mistake Cynthia would ever make. Because over the next month, she started parking in his garage repeatedly whenever the door happened to be open. Sometimes she claimed she thought it was community overflow. Other times, she ignored messages completely. The homeowner installed cameras, added warning signs, and even threatened towing services. But Cynthia continued behaving like HOA authority somehow overrode private property rights. Then came the final incident. The homeowner had planned a 2-week vacation overseas that had been scheduled for months. The night before leaving, he spent hours packing luggage, organizing travel documents, and preparing the house for departure. Exhausted, he accidentally left the garage door open while carrying boxes inside. Around midnight, security alerts suddenly appeared on his phone. Cynthia's SUV had entered the garage again, and this time something inside him finally snapped, because instead of calling her, instead of arguing, instead of filing another complaint nobody would enforce, the homeowner quietly walked into his workshop, stared at the garage door tracks for several minutes, and came up with an idea so unbelievably petty and brilliant that it would soon throw the entire HOA into absolute chaos. And once he started preparing his plan, there was no going back. The homeowner stood in the garage staring at Cynthia's SUV for nearly 10 straight minutes while the neighborhood sat completely silent outside. And honestly, that image alone feels cinematic in the most terrifying HOA way possible. The security lights reflected off the polished white paint of her luxury SUV, while suitcases for an international vacation sat stacked near the front door. Most people would probably panic in that situation. 7. Some would call a tow company. Others would wake the HOA board and start another pointless argument. But this guy had already spent months dealing with Cynthia's entitlement, and something about seeing her vehicle inside his garage again completely erased whatever patience he had left. Bro, this is exactly why people should never push quiet individuals too far. The calm ones eventually stop arguing and start planning. Instead of confronting her, he walked into the side workshop attached to the garage and pulled out heavy clamps, metal brackets, and a portable welding unit he used for home projects. At first, the idea sounded insane, even inside his own head, but the more he thought about it, the more perfect it became. Cynthia believed HOA authority allowed her to ignore boundaries because nobody had ever forced consequences onto her personally. She always assumed rules existed for other people, so the homeowner decided to give her a very direct lesson about property rights. Over the next hour, he carefully welded reinforced steel brackets across the garage door tracks, locking the entire system completely shut from the inside, not permanently damaging the SUV, not touching her vehicle at all, just making it physically impossible for the garage door to open without serious work equipment. And the craziest part was that technically, legally, the vehicle remained voluntarily parked on private property, without permission, and that detail would become incredibly important later. Then, after double-checking his security cameras, the homeowner grabbed his luggage, locked the front entrance, turned off his phone notifications, and calmly left for the airport while Cynthia's SUV remained trapped inside the sealed garage overnight. The absolute chaos started the next morning around 7:15 a.m. 8. Cynthia apparently arrived at the homeowner's property wearing workout clothes and carrying a coffee cup, fully expecting to grab her SUV and continue her weekend like nothing had happened. Instead, she found the garage door completely sealed shut. At first, she reportedly thought the automatic opener malfunctioned. Security footage later showed her repeatedly pressing the exterior keypad while visibly growing more frustrated every few seconds. Then she started pounding on the garage door hard enough to wake nearby neighbors. And honestly, this is where the story transforms from annoying HOA drama into full-blown neighborhood legend. Because Cynthia quickly realized something horrifying. The homeowner was gone. His car was gone. The house lights were off, and her SUV was still trapped inside somebody else's garage. Bro, hearing this part absolutely destroyed me. The panic must have hit her like a truck. At first she tried calling him repeatedly, and then she started texting increasingly aggressive messages demanding immediate access to community property, which was insane considering she was literally describing another person's garage. When he didn't respond, she contacted several HOA board members, hoping they would pressure him remotely. But once the board learned she had parked inside a resident's private garage, without permission, again, even they became hesitant to defend her openly. That's exactly how people react when entitled behavior finally becomes impossible to excuse publicly. By noon, the situation had escalated into a complete neighborhood spectacle. Residents gathered outside pretending to check mailboxes while secretly watching Cynthia melt down in real time. Some neighbors already knew about the months of parking disputes, and word spread unbelievably fast. Suddenly, everyone understood why the homeowner finally snapped. Honestly, most people seem less shocked by the revenge itself and more shocked that someone finally stood up to her at all. 9. Cynthia became increasingly desperate because her SUV contained not only personal belongings but also documents for an upcoming real estate conference she planned attending that weekend. She eventually called the garage repair company, hoping they could force the door open, but the technicians refused after discovering reinforced welded brackets securing the tracks internally. Since the homeowner legally owned the structure and wasn't present to authorize work, the company wanted nothing to do with potential liability issues. That part was incredible. Everything had been planned perfectly. Over the next 2 days, Cynthia spiraled publicly in ways that completely destroyed her authority within the HOA community. She posted furious neighborhood forum messages accusing the homeowner of harassment, unlawful imprisonment of property, and anti-community retaliation, but residents immediately pushed back online, reminding everyone that she had illegally entered private property multiple times beforehand. Several neighbors even shared stories about her abusing HOA power against them, too. And just like that, the entire power dynamic shifted overnight. The woman who spent years intimidating residents suddenly became the center of public humiliation instead. People started mocking her openly during HOA discussions. Memes appeared in the neighborhood Facebook group joking about premium HOA garage parking packages. Someone even edited a photo of her SUV behind cartoon prison bars. Bro, that level of neighborhood pettiness is honestly unmatched. But the real finishing blow came 3 days later when the homeowner finally responded with a single calm email sent from his vacation resort overseas. Attached were security screenshots documenting every unauthorized garage entry Cynthia had committed over the previous month. Alongside them sat a formal trespassing complaint drafted by his attorney. 10. And the moment the HOA board saw those documents, Cynthia's entire reign started collapsing instantly. By the time the homeowner returned from vacation nearly 2 weeks later, the entire neighborhood atmosphere had completely changed. And honestly, that might have been the most satisfying part of the entire story. Cynthia spent years making everyone else feel nervous and powerless, but now she was the one avoiding eye contact every time she stepped outside. The HOA board had gone into full damage control mode almost immediately after receiving the attorney letter. Once lawyers became involved, nobody wanted the situation escalating further because the security footage made everything painfully clear. Cynthia had repeatedly entered private property without permission and used a resident's garage like personal parking storage. Worse, several board members already knew about previous complaints and ignored them. That opened the HOA itself to potential liability issues. Bro, hearing that completely changed the balance of power overnight. The board held an emergency meeting while the homeowner was still overseas. Residents packed the clubhouse harder than anyone had seen in years because people finally felt safe and criticizing HOA leadership publicly. One after another, neighbors started sharing their own stories about Cynthia abusing authority, selectively enforcing rules, issuing retaliatory violations, and threatening fines over personal disagreements. Apparently, the garage incident became the final straw that gave everyone courage to speak openly. That's exactly how these situations work in real life. One person standing up finally makes everybody else realize they aren't alone. 11. Cynthia tried defending herself by claiming she believed the garage was temporarily available for community usage, which honestly sounded even more ridiculous the moment she said it publicly. Nobody bought the excuse anymore, especially after security screenshots showed her entering the property multiple separate times without permission. Within days, Cynthia resigned from the HOA board entirely. And the irony was unbelievable. The same woman who obsessed over controlling parking rules ended up becoming the most infamous parking story the neighborhood had ever seen. Even months later, residents still joked about checking garages. Before HOA meetings, as for the homeowner, he finally got peace again. No more fake violations, no more intimidation, no more random parking abuse. He simply installed a stronger garage security system, kept the camera footage archived permanently, and went back to living quietly. But the story didn't fully end there, because after Cynthia resigned, several former HOA board members suddenly became very interested in reviewing years of old complaints, fines, and enforcement records connected to her leadership. And what they started discovering behind the scenes was even messier than anyone expected. Bro, stories like this are exactly why HOA revenge videos explode online, because they tap into something almost everybody understands, the frustration of dealing with entitled people who think rules only apply to everyone else. And honestly, the craziest part here wasn't even the welded garage door. It was Cynthia genuinely believing she could repeatedly park inside somebody else's private garage without consequences. That level of entitlement is absolutely unreal, but at the same time, it also feels painfully believable. And that's exactly how some power-hungry HOA personalities operate in real life, once nobody challenges them for long enough. 12. What made this revenge so satisfying was how controlled it stayed. The homeowner never damaged her SUV, never screamed publicly, and never escalated emotionally. He simply let Cynthia's own actions trap her in the consequences. She created herself, and somehow that always becomes the most brutal kind of revenge imaginable. Honestly, hearing this story felt like watching years of neighborhood frustration finally explode all at once, and the moment the entire HOA community stopped being afraid of Cynthia, her authority disappeared almost instantly. That was incredible. If this HOA story blew your mind, you are definitely not alone, because honestly, this might be one of the most satisfying property revenge stories ever. Imagine being so entitled that you illegally parked inside someone's garage, and then act shocked when consequences finally show up. Bro, people like this exist everywhere, and that's why these stories feel so real. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more insane HOA drama, revenge stories, malicious compliance, and unbelievable neighborhood chaos. And seriously, let me know in the comments, was welding the garage shut genius level revenge, or did the homeowner go too far?